Ellie, welcome to the Soccer Queens podcast.
Hey Erica, yeah, great to be here. I know we've been going back and forth, the last couple of months to try and make this happen. And I think historically our paths have kind of passed each other, but crossed each other at other times. So yeah, really, really good to chat to you and connect today.
I'm really looking forward to speaking with you, and it was really awesome to finally meet in person a month ago when we were at that female athlete conference in Wisconsin, which was just such a cool event. So I think that was the perfect time to finally meet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just on that event itself, that was a super awesome event, and I think just the preface and the messaging behind that. I mean, for me particularly, trying to get more females into this space, more educate young females on this space was just a really awesome opportunity. And yeah, nice to finally meet you after all these years too.
Yeah, it was so awesome, and the energy you get from those conferences is amazing. And I don't know if you had been to an event like that before with all female athletes, like young girls. I haven't, but it was incredible.
Yeah, no, I would say the same. I've been to similar events, but I wouldn't say, all females and, females of that cohort and that age group. So yeah, just a really nice opportunity. And I think, if that can, develop and grow in the coming years, and that will just be, an added benefit.
Special shout out to Synergy Sport Performance for hosting. I'll leave their Twitter in the caption below. They're awesome, and just really follow what they did for the event because maybe it will inspire you to do it at your facility or your club. So maybe we can start something too. That would be
Yeah.
awesome.
So, mm.
All right. So I wanted you to come on because you obviously have a wealth of experience working with female athletes, especially in the soccer space, formerly for the US women's national team. And now you are still working with female athletes. But just give a background on your journey in sport performance and what you're up to today.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. I think, I started in this journey, maybe like 20 years ago now, and really just saw an opportunity and a space where help was needed. I was going through university and very keen to work in sport, and kind of saw the gap that there was in sports science between, maybe male environments at the time compared to female environments, and very much felt, that was a space I could make an impact. But with that, there wasn't a lot being done in that space at the same time. So very fortunate to get some early applied work at a girls' youth academy back in the UK, Birmingham City Ladies, Birmingham City Women. And that was really where I started to learn my craft. And then through there, just, opportunity after opportunity fell my way, and I was very fortunate in what came next, able to get some applied work experience at the Football Association, kind of going under Dawn Scott's wing, which was awesome to learn off her and be mentored by her. And then navigating through, the next step, moving to the US, and ultimately overseeing the youth national team programming when it came to sports science and performance, before transitioning into the role of head of performance for the women's national team for the last 4 or 5 years, before stepping away and attempting to go down this consultancy space that I'm in now, but very much intent on staying, impacting the space, working with female athletes, female players, working with coaches, working with practitioners, working with teams and organizations to really still drive the very much, I think, need for health, wellness, performance support across the women's landscape.
That's quite a journey, and I'm just really curious when you started with the US women's national team, what were some of the biggest needs that they needed right off the bat with performance enhancement or injury reduction?
Yeah, good question. When I stepped into the women's national team, I think this is a team that already had a lot of attention and a lot of spotlight on them, and really were starting to make real good headway and lead the headway when it came to female health, menstrual cycle management, those really female specific topics that, maybe weren't getting a lot of attention in previous years. And I think, the women's national team did a really good job of bringing that to the forefront, not just from a federation level, but from the players there that were really kind of speaking out and demanding more and asking for more and really bringing a really shining spotlight to that area. So for me, when I stepped into that area, the challenge was to then continue that message, continue that advocacy, and continue the work that had been done within that space. So I think, just honing in on that, what I learned through that time when I stepped into that space, we were starting to use, wearable technology to really inform, how we were going to manage female athletes through their menstrual cycle. And back then, we did it in a way where, they'd put data on an app, track them throughout. And then, we would get these assumed phases of menstrual cycle, and we'd put players into buckets. And, if you're in this phase of your cycle, you shouldn't do this. And if you're in this phase, you shouldn't do this. But I think really where it's developed at now, and, where my knowledge and, from the research I'm comfortable within that space, is transitioned to more of a space where maybe we shouldn't be relying on those forms of technology to really inform us of those assumed phases of the cycle. And the reality is we can only do that through more invasive methods, whether that be through blood testing. But I think that's the space that I was trying to navigate, being in the women's national team at that time and coming from a space where, hey, we've started at this point in the ladder and this got us so far. But really, maybe, we're in a different place now, and how should this be done? And that messaging behind, yes, technology, data is very informative and can be very helpful. But I think the crossroads where we're at now, generally with this area, is to not go far too down the road where, we're using technology to maybe tell us things that aren't 100% accurate, and really staying true to the science and what that does tell us in terms of how we do track females, and particularly menstrual cycle management.
So everyone asks me all the time about the menstrual cycle impact on ACL injury risk and also performance. And it's probably one of the most common questions I get from parents of girls soccer players and also a lot of teenage girls soccer players. So I do want to dive into this. Is there anything we know for sure about the menstrual cycle and impact on injury, or is it still just too confusing in the research?
I think probably most of my days, I'll be honest, I'm more confused than confident and assured in this area. You do your best as a practitioner in this space to really look at what the research is, speak to people working in this space, whether that's from a research perspective or from an applied perspective. And there are many thoughts about what could contribute to female ACLs, and maybe why is that rate so much higher compared to male athletes, and whether that's from hormonal influences or developmental influences, anatomical differences between males and females, biomechanical differences. It could be a combination of that, and or it could be one of those factors isn't as I think prominent as maybe we think. So really to hone in and say, hey, this is what I'd hang my hat on, and this is where I feel where maybe most of it is coming from. It is really hard to do, and like you said, people want an answer on this area because it is such an issue. And while I do think there is validity within those areas, potential hormone contributions, potential differences in biomechanics, I also think we can't overlook the gender factor, and maybe what females growing up get exposed to, and throughout their pathway, to be honest, those differences, from societal differences, whether that's what females are given through their development, whether that's from a resource perspective, whether that's from an education perspective, whether that's from a facility perspective, whether that's just from norms around topics like strength training and power training and what that should look like for a female versus a male. So I think there are a lot of things in the background that aren't necessarily that, fall under those brackets of, biomechanical, anatomical, but really, what females do get access to and what they go through their lifespan as an athlete now, maybe compared to male athletes. I think there's some work to do there and some attention to pay there. And with that, we are making good headway. Women's sports is booming and there's a lot of attention and resources being put into it. But with the same breath, we are still very behind where we need to be.
One concern I get with the menstrual cycle is a lot of girls will fear it
Mm.
because of all this information coming out that injury risk is maybe higher in certain phases, and girls will kind of get into panic mode. But menstrual cycles aren't going away, nor should they, because they're healthy. So it's like, are we making girls fear it too much with this extra science and information, or are we not empowering them enough? I feel like there's a balance here.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. I think, how education, how messaging is delivered is very, very important. And I think, that fear factor is definitely something I've encountered with the athletes that I'm working with and have worked with in the past. And it is really about, really being strong and informed with the education that you are delivering to players, but also, from the player's perspective, doing their due diligence to really look into the information and get people around them and their support group to help them. I would say, some of those fear factors associated with it, even the example, hey, this part of my cycle is going to make me feel like this part of my cycle, I'm not going to be as strong, this part of my cycle I have to avoid doing X, Y, and Z. And a lot of those research studies and those thoughts around notions like that came from studies that were mostly done through ways of assumed menstrual cycles. So what I was previously talking about, hey, we're going to track, and this algorithm from this app is going to say you're in this part of your cycle at a certain period. But the reality is we don't know that from just entering, the essential information on a tracking app. We're only going to know that really from the insights that we would take more objectively from blurred saliva analysis. So I think, that's where, we collectively need to do a really good job. Yes, we're getting traction in this area. Yes, it's got a lot of progress in this area. But at the same time, maybe because of the need to hurry this information out and feel the pressure to look into this area as researchers, as practitioners, as people working with athletes, there is a bit of it maybe where we've ran before we can walked, and now some of the messaging that has come out behind that in terms of, hey, what you can and can't do in certain phases is a little bit misguided and probably confusing to athletes as well. But all that to say, the menstrual cycle, like you said, is not going away. It is part of, healthy development of a young female as a young athlete. And, it's not something to be feared. Whatever part of your cycle you're in, you can always work with it. And I think, that's the messaging there that, we want to make sure young females do have healthy, regular cycles, unless there are obviously other reasons why that might not be happening, contraceptives, etc. But then the messaging that goes with that in terms of, actually it's healthy because if you do have a regular, healthy menstrual cycle, that informs, bone development and bone progression and those kind of topics. So, yeah, I think summarizing, a lot of maybe fear around this topic still, but with that, more and more people trying to join the education initiatives to really get those strong messages out there.
I love that. Now, I want to talk about just other factors that could play a role in injury risk and performance. what are some factors we can't control with ACL injuries? And then what are some we can control?
Good question. I mean, I'll start with the ones, that we can control. For me, it's a lot of, and again, just focusing really on this youth cohort, which I know is a big span of your audience. I think we talk a lot about load management, and that for me is pivotal to everything. I'll give you a little bit of a anecdote from when I first arrived in the US. We're talking 10 years ago now. Arrived here at the end of 2015, and I remember it was one of my first camps with a youth national team. It was a U17 camp. We were in Florida actually, and just really trying to, as a new practitioner working in the US, trying to be respectful of cultural norms and what is a typical life for a youth athlete here. We were doing an initial workshop, and the question I asked was, when was your last recovery day? Two questions actually. When was your last recovery day, and when was your last off season? Both answers collectively from the group very, very much alarmed me, because in terms of the off season, they were like, ugh. And this was a strong, resounding response from the whole team. It wasn't like one or two players. Maybe 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, and off days, recovery days. Oh no, that wasn't a thing. So kind of shocked me a little. I'd known obviously about the American mentality: train hard, push hard, do everything you can. But for me, this was going a little bit to the other extreme. Fast forward 10 years on, I think, within this time span that I've been here, I would like to say we've made some progress in that area, and maybe we have a little bit, but really not at the pace that I think we need to. And all that to say, I think load management really for youth female players in this country can still do well from a lot more education and a lot more attention, not just at the player level, but also, the practitioner level as well, and the coaches working with these players. Because ultimately, we need to manage that workload. We need to have very, informed, structured periodization, not just to our weeks, to our months, to our years. We need to help these young athletes manage their fatigue, and making sure all that works together. And again, just coming under that umbrella of load management, it can be fairly normal now for a youth player. They'll have their club team, maybe they'll have their high school team, they'll have their S&C coach, maybe they'll have a technical trainer as well. And there's a lot of moving pieces to it. But fundamentally, I think, one of the sticking issues here is the fact that those environments aren't necessarily collaborating and cohesive. And by that I mean, if a player goes to an external strength and conditioning coach, does that coach know what this player's weeks look like? Does this coach know what their months look like? Do they know what they did yesterday at training? And not just, coach, I went to training and I trained for 60 minutes. Was that small space? Was that high speed running? Was that big space? Was it intensive work? Was it extensive work? So really that load on that player, there's so many moving pieces to it. And, I think just to summarize this one particular message, we have too much load, players doing too much volume, not enough rest to manage and mitigate fatigue, which ultimately can lead to overuse and injury issues as well. And then the other part of that, the cohesiveness of how that load works together throughout training weeks and competition weeks to work in harmony. And then, I think we've talked about strength training, but I think that is just such a big area that, again, is getting more attention. I think, young females coming up are more educated about, hey, I do need to, be doing this kind of work. But I think, being very intentional about what that looks like at specific ages is can sometimes get lost in translation. And, there's a lot that goes into that, what a player should be doing at a certain age. When should they progress to different difficulties, different processes, different ways of moving through that continuum, is challenging. But I think, just bringing it back to that is important. That's important for their development. That's important to keeping them healthy. But it cannot be done in isolation away from everything else they're doing, and it has to be very cohesive.
I'm really glad you brought up the load management. I think that is a big issue that's brewing under the surface that not a lot of people are talking about, at least parents and some youth coaches. A lot of them will point to the ACL or the injuries is because of female anatomy or the turf fields and all these other things that aren't really in our control. But the year round workload is definitely a big issue. And I guess how can we manage this? Because in the state of youth soccer in the US, it's especially in the ECNL and some of the bigger leagues on the macro level, they're playing from August until June or July. There's some coaches who do a great job at the micro level with the training week and manipulating those intensities, but then just not having that off season in the bigger picture is tough. So I don't know if you had any recommendations for that, since we can't really change the schedules. It's something I'm still trying to figure out.
Yeah. For me, I think, you alluded to it, like it's quick and easy just to put, hey, the prevalence of youth female injuries under the umbrella of, well, they've got different anatomy, or, biomechanically they're different to a male, and that's why it is. But when you just zoom in on a player's week, there's a couple of factors to there, and I still see it a lot. The players going to training, to their soccer practices, most of the time they're going to warm themselves up. Potentially it's going to be the same warm up every time they go. A couple of, maybe basic stretching, mobility, dynamic movements. For me, that's a really good opportunity to build in some of these prevention, injury prevention programming. And again, we're not talking about like being really, in depth here, just some core basic exercises that, if we can deliver at the coaching level and make sure that the players executing them at a really good level, then, we can make some difference there. And, the research backs that. If we are intentional about some of these programs and taking opportunity to do them and deliver them and coach the players through them, we can make good progress. So that's one thing. We have this window of opportunity where they are with us, but we're not actually making the most time of it. So that's an opportunity to do something versus just putting it on, hey, it's because they've got different anatomy. The next part of that, they do a lot throughout the week. They're playing multiple games on the weekend. They have everything in that, that a youth athlete does. Going to school, homework, some are traveling, 2 or 3 hours a day to get back and forth from soccer training. And for me, I do not have the answer to your original question, but I think it's just a real accountability moment collectively from all of us to actually put our hands in the middle and say, hey, this is on all of us. We can keep passing the blame, for want of a better word, around, actually, injury prevention is nothing to do with me. Health and wellness management is nothing to do with me. I just focus on this. But no, it's all our responsibilities. It's all our responsibilities to keep these young players healthy and work together to do that. And yeah, I think we're in the same bucket here. I'm really trying to make, change at that. And I think, one potential area that we could maybe do better at in this country is really taking initiative at the league level, and just having real, not just governance and structure in terms of, what female athletes have in their environments, But how do we, at a league level, educate these coaches, educate these practitioners about these processes and things we can do and things we can educate them on to deliver to their young females in their environments? So that's a wall I'm knocking on right now at the league level to really try and infiltrate that. To, hey, let's take a step back. This is a really key opportunity, a key moment in time where we can really try and make an impact there. And I'm not saying that's easy, but ultimately something has to give, because we are on two ends of the spectrum right now, and the players usually in the middle and the ones losing out.
You did mention strength training, and I want to talk about the importance of it during the season and how to go about it in a way that does no harm and it
Hmm.
helps the player. One mistake I'm seeing some girls make is their one day off a week is a Friday. And they want to schedule their strength session that day with their strength coach, and they don't really have any recovery days as a result. So I think a lot of people fear, well, if we lift on a practice day, that's not going to be good for us. But why might that be better than doing it on your one day off right before a game?
Yeah, good question. I think, if you take that one day off, before the game day, that's the only opportunity maybe that these young athletes are getting to recover from the week. And, let's not underestimate, the importance of recovery. Yes, they're, young females, young players, young people in general, compared to older athletes, and especially me, they have that, I guess, I'm a Duracell bunny, I can just go. um and maybe you don't notice sometimes, how that is affecting you, because you think you have endless amounts of energy and you can keep going. But it does take work from the body and intentional work from the body to recover. And if you are continually to put load through your body throughout the week without that recovery day, where you're not stressing your muscles, where you're not really taxing your energy systems, that ability to recover is just going to keep being compounded. So you kind of go into your next week, and also into your games in a stage where you are carrying residual fatigue, and even with the best of intentions, you're doing everything right. Nutrition's awesome. Everything else is awesome. I'm sleeping awesome. I'm doing my ice bath, whatever it might be. There is still an element of, that's probably far reaching, because we know these young athletes have so much else to compete with. They're not 100% of the time an athlete. So really, is nutrition going to be optimal? Probably not. When you're getting up at a crack of dawn in the morning, getting to school, doing different classes, eating on the go, getting in the car. So we already know some of these other areas that, to keep us healthy, aren't going to be optimized just because of their lifestyle. And that's not a criticism by any means, but really eating into that recovery day, you're just not doing yourself any favors from a fatigue perspective. You're going to put yourself at risk in terms of what that game might look like at the weekend, because you haven't been able to recover through the week. You've got a big training load behind you, and then the most probably intense, highest training load of the week you're going into, where your body's probably not quite prepared for it. And then on top of that, you might have to play two games in that weekend, and then the cycle starts again. So I would say, in terms of the strength training, there's a few ways around that. Yes, we recognize it's important to do. I will wholeheartedly say, do not do it on your rest and recovery day. That is not the place to do it. That is the message there that I want everyone to hear loud and clear. But can we get really, I guess, creative? And I think we need to do with some of these young athletes, and where we can sandwich that throughout the week. Are you at a school where you have a S&C facility maybe that you can do something with during your school day? So you're keeping it on a training day, but obviously getting guidance in terms of what that looks like. Is it more of an opportunity? Hey, we can't do 2 main strength sessions every week just from a logistical standpoint, but what we can do is maybe we can do 15 to 20 minutes here microdosed throughout the week. So we're doing smaller blocks of work, but it's more efficient and more easy to sandwich into those weeks. But really, yeah, just trying to be creative with that and working with the support system around it. I think, club level, if you are a club that is delivering a soccer training competitive environment to athletes and to young players, I do my message there, the responsibility is on you to help the players be able to do that, to have those resources in house, to have the people in house, and to have the facilities and equipment needed to do that, because it is it's very much not about just, hey, they're here to play soccer and whatever happens between, the white lines on the grass is all we need to think about. It's that whole holistic, cohesive care of the athlete, that service that you need to provide, and that care and attention that you need to provide to keep them healthy.
I think we're both big fans of our recovery days, and your training is only as good as those off days. So it's really important to make sure you're getting a few of those throughout the week amidst this year-round madness. I want to come back to the load management. So some clubs do have GPS technology, some don't have the budget for it yet. So are there ways to manage load without technology that can kind of give everyone a good direction on what to do?
Yes, good question. I think the attention on sports science is gaining momentum here, especially in the youth landscape, and that can be a expensive buy. And really, there are some nuances that go with that. Yes, you have a piece of technology that's going to inform things and help you guide, maybe your training weeks and your player loads. But the first thing you've got to have there is someone that's really, I think, qualified and in tune and educated on what it actually means and how that information can be used. And I think, just to put that in context, a lot of these coaches don't have the opportunity to really deep dive into that education that comes under that umbrella. And it's hard to do. And even to give an example, me using GPS earlier on in my career, probably took me a really, 3 to 4 years where, I could really understand it, use it, be comfortable with it, and then start making decisions from it. Initially it's just numbers, you don't know what they mean, you don't know how they go together, you don't know how to use them. So I think unless you have the support system and the network to go with those types of technology, my advice would probably be to not move with that and put the expenses into maybe another bucket of performance, wellness, health development. But in answer to your question, I think, even in environments that do have GPS, it's always important to come back to the information that you can get from the athlete that they're directly telling you. Because yes, numbers and data can tell you one thing, but really, what is the athlete telling me? So, the two things that I would probably advise there are if you don't have, a big budget and a lot of resources, always use RPE, rate of perceived exertion, to really quantify the session. And that's just really the players telling you how long they've trained for, which you'll know anyway, but you want to get obviously all their sessions throughout the week. So if they're doing other work elsewhere, you can really quantify it all. And, how hard did they find that session from a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the hardest, most maximal thing. I would say with that, though, it takes a lot of education for the players to really understand the scale and how to use that. So, don't go into that with a, hey, there's a scale here, 1 to 10, 0 is this, 10 is the hardest thing ever. Tell me how you felt this session went. You've really got to give the context and the education behind that. And you can do that through different platforms. I've done it even here in the US when I initially started with the youth teams. It was a clipboard at the end of the session, when they're doing their cool down, just going around and getting their numbers and their feedback and just having that little bit of a conversation with the player. And you do want to get that as close to training as possible. There's no point in me giving feedback to the coach in terms of how I felt the session was yesterday, today. Those perceived feelings have 24 hours ago, I might not give an accurate representation. And also, if you don't want to do it through writing measures, just simple Excel, Google sharing platforms that the team can simply do. And then the other one is just a morning or a daily readiness questionnaire. So that's just a opportunity for the player to share with the coaches how they're feeling. And with that, you can start to see trends. So if you're asking questions about muscle soreness, hey, all the team seem to be really sore in their groins, the day or two after we did that session. Well, what did we do in that session? Well, probably went for 60 minutes, small-sided spaces, everything was accels, decels. Oh, okay, makes sense. So how can we, really review that going forwards? But yeah, I think that's a really good check-in in the morning, not just for the coaches and not just for the staff that are working with the players, but also for the player themselves to, hey, morning check-in, how am I feeling? How did I sleep? How are my muscles feeling? Am I hydrated? Where am I at today and what can I do within the space of today to really reset myself? Because, I've got a training session tonight, or no, I've got a game tomorrow, and then sharing that with the coaches. And then, the more information we can give the people working with the athlete, then, the better it is. And then we can use that to really, make changes and inform things throughout the weeks, throughout the months. Because without that, you're just kind of really stabbing around in the dark and going blind and maybe delivering stuff that isn't the most optimal or most appropriate for that time of the week.
I think you made a good point that just because you have GPS doesn't mean it's going to be the best way, because people can read it wrong and not do the right things with that data. So I think that RP is a really great suggestion and a good starting point and easy to implement for many youth coaches. Now, as we wrap up, what is some advice you would give the girls soccer players today for performance and injury reduction?
Good question. Trying to think where to start because we are wrapping up, so I want to keep it concise. I think, for me, if I was to kind of give them the top one, two, or three, it would be, really taking care of your rest and recovery. You might think that you can get away with it now, but some way or form, it will catch up with you. Whether that's through your youth years or, maybe your decision is you want to continue playing soccer through college, through pro. Everything we do now to propel us to the next step, whether the next step be next week's game or, hey, I'm going to commit to college and I'm going there in a year, we want to keep ourselves as healthy as possible. And really doing too much now and not really taking care of rest and recovery, those off seasons, those recovery days will catch up on us. And whether that manifests through injuries, overuse injuries, menstrual cycle dysfunction, it might rear its head at some point. And, we want to avoid that. And, the ultimate thing is, everyone advocating for these messages and working with these young players wants the same thing. We want you on the field, you want you healthy, you want you enjoying your game. I think the other one is energy balance. And, when it comes to nutrition, I think, there's a lot of education to do there with our young athletes in terms of actually what you do need. And I think, the mindset is, well, I need to eat X, Y, and Z and fuel X, Y, and Z to support my training. And not really the realization is that, you're a young developing female and you also need really good, sound, solid nutrition to support many other bodily functions that take a lot of energy out of your body, not just your training. So, we do see a lot of instances where that energy balance in terms of what players are fueling and taking in really doesn't match what the body needs to stay healthy and to fulfill sporting needs, daily life needs. So again, that's a one that I would advocate. There's a lot of good resources, education out there in terms of, what that might look like for a youth female, and also if you're not doing that and how it might affect your body, to be really educated on that. And, again, the people working with these players to really show an interest in that area. So I'd probably hone in on those two, the load management and, the nutrition piece to support that. Yes, we learn it as we go along, but ultimately that the foundational work that we do now to really, set ourselves up for success is ultimately really, really important too.
Awesome. So, what I took away from all this, with all the factors in ACL injuries, the most important, load management, nutrition, and then you did touch on the strength piece. I think if everyone can start with those three and really focus on those, they are going to be way ahead and it's going to help so much. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation with Ellie. I'm going to leave her links in the caption below to her social media, her website, and what she's up to today. So be sure to check out all of her amazing work and services. And don't hesitate to reach out, ask questions, leave a comment on the video. And I will see you on the next episode.